Close up to the oil depot inferno, moments after explosions caused the largest industrial fire since the war. With no wind to disperse it, the soot-laden black plume of smoke visible from space has been spreading and sinking all day over southeast England. Good evening, this is Channel 4 News. Only the time of the accident prevented a human catastrophe, but 43 people were injured, 2 seriously. The shockwave was felt up to 100 miles away from Hemel Hempstead, and panic buying of petrol followed in some areas. Tonight, the operation to control it. All day, the heat too intense to tackle as firefighters amass tens of thousands of litres of foam to launch what they call an attack in the next few hours. And the stories of those living nearby.
There was one almighty explosion, and it just like wind going through the house. Everything shook.
Dozens injured by flying glass and debris, homes and offices destroyed, shocked residents with no idea when they might be allowed back. And in Pakistan, reaching the communities who thought help would never come. We are out with the quake jumpers who find the hidden villages cut off from aid by the earthquake and the winter weather.
And the other headlines tonight, the most extreme Eurosceptic ever to lead the Conservatives, says Ken Clarke. But will his outspoken attack overshadow David Cameron's new plans to get more women elected as Tory MPs? And more frustration for Fergie as United are held at Old Trafford by struggling Everton.
A massive inferno continues to burn at the Buncefield oil depot, a plume of smoke still drifting miles into the night sky. Police say it was miraculous that no one died in this morning's massive explosions. Their force felt up to 100 miles away as flames shot more than 200 feet into the sky. Local residents are still being advised to stay indoors. The first blast happened after 6 a.m. at the Buncefield Oil Storage Depot near Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire. The depot is the 5th largest oil storage facility in the UK. An industrial estate separates the terminal from the residential area, but many homes lie less than a quarter of a mile away, and at least 2,000 residents have been evacuated. Lucy Manning reports now on the dramatic blaze and those who witnessed it.
It's still hit and blowing up inside. The heat from here is unbelievable. You can really feel the heat.
Sunday morning, 6 a.m, and this woke the whole town and far beyond.
Miles into the sky, look at that. And still, one tanker still to go. Still not gone. Let's hope to God that doesn't go while I'm standing here.
A number of explosions at the Buncefield oil depot turning the sky bright orange. Flames rising just before the sun rose. The sound of the explosions woke everyone. They were heard up to 100 miles from here. It was total destruction.
This whole building here, completely gone. No windows left, nothing. This building here, look at the state of this building.
Only the early hour and the weekend saved this area from a catastrophic number of deaths. Amazingly, it's not thought anyone was killed. Daylight came, but the sunlight was blocked out by thick black smoke. As it spread over the town, the people of Hemel Hempstead came out to look and to relive their early morning horror.
It was just a horrendous noise, and the flames were just unbelievable. It was quite surreal just to see the sky with sort of flames shooting up into it at that time of the morning. I mean, you can't really explain what you feel. It's just incredible to see.
There was one almighty explosion, and it just like wind going through the house. Everything shook.
The massive big tank of it, the flames were like bellowing out of it. They were about 200 something feet high, and the smoke was like pouring out at that point.
Police told residents to stay indoors and shut their windows. The cloud not poisonous, they said, but it would make people cough and feel sick. But with such a fireball in their midst, it seemed as if the whole town had come out to see what even hardened firemen had never seen before.
This is possibly the largest incident of this kind in peacetime Europe. So it just puts some perspective on what we're dealing with.
The black smoke just keeps on billowing, getting higher and higher, and the flames are still burning. The problem is that the fire service can't actually fight this fire. It's too intense, it's too hot, it's too dangerous. So all they can do is contain it, which means these flames are probably going to burn for some time yet. Despite what many thought when they heard the massive bangs this morning, police do think that this was an accident, and given the amount of fuel still there, feared there could be more explosions. So many people were told to leave their homes near the depot, 200 arriving at this leisure complex.
I got woken up, it was an earthquake. The whole house was shaking, things were flying off the windowsill. It was like red outside.
When do you think you might be able to get back into your house?
I have no idea whatsoever. No.
The only certainty here that the black clouds hanging over this town would stay. The light coming tonight not from the moon, but the flames. Because more than 12 hours after this explosion, the fuel is still burning. The fire a frightening and uncontrollable sight. The fire service still has an enormous job on its hands, and the battle to stop this fire will go on through the night. Well, there's a massive operation going on behind me to try and contain these flames that are still reaching high into the sky. 150 firemen are near that site working on trying to contain this blaze, and they've got enough floodlights this evening to cover 4 football pitches. What they're going to be doing is starting with the smaller blazes and then moving on to the bigger ones in an attempt to contain them. What they're going to do tonight is use 35,000 litres of water a minute to try and with the blaze. The idea is that there are 7 tanks that haven't gone up in flames, and they're trying to circle those tanks with water and foam to try and stop those tanks going up and causing more explosions. They're pumping water from the Grand Union Canal to try and achieve that. But it really is behind me an absolutely spectacular sight that so many hours after the explosions this morning, the flames are still going up into the sky. The fire service say that the operation has gone so far as well as could be expected, but they're not being complacent. Samira.
Thank you, Lucy. Lucy at the scene of the Buncefield depot fire. And for anyone worried about relatives or friends, police have set up a casualty bureau hotline, and the number is 0800 096 0095. That's 0800 096 0095. And traffic disruption is likely to continue into tomorrow morning. The Highways Agency says parts of the M1 motorway could stay closed with knock-on effects for nearby M25 and the A1. But they say extra trains will be running on Virgin's West Coast line to and from London during the rush hour. Now, health and safety experts admit they're baffled by what created a blast powerful enough to be heard, well, 100 miles away in some cases. The materials stored at Buncefield are highly flammable, but an explosion with enough force to rip through buildings is, they say, a surprise. The government's own health and safety executive will not be able to assess the plant for several days, but our reporter Sarah Lockett has been examining what could have caused the blaze and the effect it's had on people and the environment.
The Buncefield blast has already been called the biggest incident of its kind in peacetime, and although the fire is far from out, the crucial question is, how did it start? It's the UK's 5th largest fuel depot. The terminal was opened in 1968 and for the past 15 years has been run by Total and Texaco, although other companies such as BP and Shell also operate there. It can store 150,000 tonnes of oil, petrol and the aviation fuel kerosene, with 400 tankers filled every day. The terminal operates around the clock. It's supplied by a pipeline from Lindsay Oil Refinery in North Lincolnshire, and other pipes run to Heathrow, Luton and Stansted airports. Total has defended its fire safety provision at the site.
Safety underpins everything that we do in the terminal. And this site has an exemplary safety record. In fact, we've operated for a number of years without any major incident at all.
Experts are baffled by reports of a 50-metre fireball.
The explosion is a surprise, an explosion of this magnitude. The likeliest place for an ignition to occur is where it's being transferred from one place of containment to another, where it goes through valves which may leak, possibly, or where there's a vehicle involved.
Today, thick black cloud of smoke spread southeast and southwest and was visible from space, but environmental groups said it would disperse high above ground. The Environment Agency is monitoring any spillages into rivers and groundwater if they occur. The smoke also cast a shadow over London. Medical experts warned this cocktail of chemicals could affect asthma sufferers and the elderly, irritating the lungs and brain. But cold, clear atmospheric conditions meant the way. Part of the M1 motorway nearby remains closed and police say it might not reopen until tomorrow. Drivers are being asked to find alternative routes. Panic buying of petrol also led to long queues at service stations in the area and caused several to close early when stocks ran out. The Petrol Industry Association says supply tankers are diverting to Northampton and Corriton in Essex for supplies. The scale of the blast is already being compared to the Milford Haven oil refinery fire in 1994. Investigators will be looking for any parallels. The explosion there was caused by flammable hydrocarbons escaping and igniting after a valve malfunction. But the Health and Safety Executive concluded it was caused by a combination of failures in management, equipment and control systems. When the fire alarm went off this morning, pipes running into the depot automatically shut off, according to the British Pipeline Agency, which operates them. They'll remain closed as airports get their supplies routed through other pipelines. The fire crews tackling the blaze have played a waiting game, cutting off the fuel source and letting it burn. They've amassed huge stocks of foam from neighbouring fire brigades and the oil industry to damp down the fire when they tackle it later tonight. They'll also use water from the Grand Union Canal. But as they make their preparations, explosions are still occurring.
We can go over now to outside the leisure centre where evacuated families are spending the evening, and we're going to talk to the local MP, Mike Penning, who also happens to be a former firefighter. As someone who's presumably been trained for exactly the sort of emergency and I assume never faced it, can you talk us through what firefighters will be preparing for, as we understand they're going in the next few hours to try and tackle this blaze?
Yeah, this is exactly what they train for. They hope and pray that they never have to do this sort of training. I did this sort of training myself when I was in. I did have to do it, sadly, at Corriton. But when they're on the way there, they go into autopilot. Their training takes over. They know there's almost certainly going to be casualties there and it's going to be dangerous, but they actually get stuck in straight away. And we've got some of the bravest and best trained firemen in the world here, and they've shown it again today. And there had been reports that they might not be able to go in until tomorrow morning. Do you know why they're going to start the operation earlier? Yeah, I think basically that the residual fuel that's there, that's away, mostly the kerosene and the diesel, seems to have been vented off and burning off quite well. That means that they can get closer. The foam's here, I understand. They've got a contingency plan to pull enough water up from the Grand Union Canal as well as the hydrants here, and they think they can go in tonight, and that's a very sensible thing for them to do. As the temperature drops down, that will have effects on the fire itself, and if they can get in there tonight, then I wish them all the best of luck. Let's look at the situation of residents and casualties. Everyone must be relieved that the casualties aren't more serious, although of course there are a couple of people very seriously hurt. But surely you must be worried, MP, that such a major explosion could take place in a facility which presumably should have the highest of safety standards, in a residential area at that. Yeah. Of course, and it is very close to the residential area. The reports are indicating that it's just outside Hemel Hempstead. It's not. It's actually very, very close to my housing estates. And of course, I'm very, very concerned for the safety of my residents. But the plans, the contingency plans for the emergencies have worked really well here today. Volunteers have come in, the Red Cross are coming, the council's done their bit, our firefighters and the emergency services done theirs. So it's worked brilliantly well. We'll have to have an inquiry. We need to know what's happened, if there's mistakes been made, and then we need to sort that out. But that's not part of what we need to do tonight. As a community, we've done really well. We've pulled together. This is a very tight-knit community here in the Hemel. This has affected nearly everybody here. Our schools are closed tomorrow, and most of the industrial estates here will be closed tomorrow. So there'll be plenty of time for people to think just how lucky we have been here today. We do have injuries. We need to think of those people that are in hospital this evening. But considering what could have happened, we're very, very lucky. But also considering what could have happened if it had been, say, 9 a.m. on Monday morning, do you not feel, assuming it is an accident, that maybe facilities like this should not be sited in such areas in future, and maybe should be moved away if they are there still? I think there's two things we need to address here. This facility was built nearly 50 years ago when the new town was built, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. So we can look at the reports now and find out what exactly went on. Secondly, I understand there was maintenance going on in there, which may have had a contributory factor as to what occurred. That maintenance wouldn't have been happening if the depot was in full operation and being used. So let's wait for the reports before we do any blame naming, and let's just concentrate on how lucky we are tonight, a community pulling together with excellent emergency services. That's the important thing.
And tell us briefly about the residents, what help they're going to get. Some of them have been told they can go home tomorrow, but a lot of their homes are not livable in, are they?
Well, a lot of residents are actually in hotels in the local area this evening. I still have some of them that are waiting for medical treatment and drugs to come to them from the local pharmacies, because obviously their tablets and their medication are left at home. But everybody that needs a bed this evening has got one. There are residents returning home now into the area where they think they can still go home and they can't, sadly. So we've got beds for those. Every hotel in the area has done their bit, and they've pulled together. There is a lot of boarding up needs to be done. There's roofs missing off houses here. There's whole sections of windows through. The council have done a remarkable job here, but they can't do everything. But it's a rebuilding exercise that we're going to take place on now, and we all need to pull together to do that.
Mike Penning, MP for Hemel Hempstead, thank you very much. Well, now with a look at today's other main news, here's Bridget.
The Conservative leader, David Cameron, is planning a move to increase the number of women who can become Tory MPs. Tomorrow, he'll announce that all Conservative-held and marginal seats will select candidates from a new list, around half of them women. Party officials denied the changes would produce second-class MPs. But the plan could be overshadowed by an outspoken attack by the former Chancellor Ken Clarke. He warned Mr Cameron to drop what he described as a head-banging plan to take the Conservatives out of the European Parliament's centre-right group of MEPs. The Foreign Office says it's doing all it can to try to save the British hostage Norman Kember, as a deadline for his execution passed without word. Despite appeals across the world for the release of Mr Kember and 3 other Western captives, nothing's been heard from their Iraqi kidnappers. Relatives of some of the 103 people killed in yesterday's plane crash in Nigeria have been searching hospital mortuaries for the bodies of their loved ones. Many of those on board the Sosoliso Airlines jet were children from a Catholic school who'd been on their way home for the Christmas holidays. The plane crashed during a storm and burst into flames at Port Harcourt Airport. Just 7 people survived. Investigators are trying to establish why it happened. Thousands of youths chanting racist slogans have fought running battles with police in Sydney. Ethnic tensions erupted after a mob attacked people of Middle Eastern appearance at a beachside suburb of the city. At least 6 people were arrested and several were injured as police used pepper spray and batons to control the crowd. Football, and in the Premiership, Manchester United were home to Everton. It was a surprisingly even battle in which Everton displayed not a little flair. It was matched by a sublime goal from Ryan Giggs.
After the indignity of their Champions League exit, Manchester United's nightmare appeared to be continuing. It took the struggling Everton side only 7 minutes to gain the upper hand, James McFadden scoring from a tricky angle. Despite his lightning pace, Wayne Rooney's attempts to equalise came to nothing. It was Ryan Giggs who brought Man U level 15 minutes in. The superbly judged precision surely the best this season, and certainly something to cheer the boss. At the start of the second half, Giggs would have scored again, but for a great save by Wright. The rest of the game was an evenly matched affair, Everton at times appearing more confident and canny than the hosts, despite their lowly position in the Premiership. Wright saved the day for the visitors, denying Giggs a second goal in the 91st minute. It ended 1-1, just the kind of result Alex Ferguson doesn't need.
In the Scottish Premier League, Kilmarnock put up a strong fight against Rangers. There were 2 goals from Peter Lovenkrantz in the first half. But after the break, Gary MacDonald put the home side back in the game. Soon afterwards, Peter Lovenkrantz had completed a hat-trick and victory looked certain. A goal from Chris Boyd briefly raised hopes for the home side, but it ended Kilmarnock 2, Rangers 3. Rangers moved from 5th place to 4th in the SPL.
When we come back, we're live at the scene of the oil depot fire with the latest, plus Pakistan's emergency rescue squad. They're known as the Quake Jumpers, a special team of mountaineers, and they're trained to get to the villages other rescuers can't reach.
He couldn't take it, so he's leaving alive. He's come to know he's leaving on the 8:15 to Croydon, leaving on the 8:15, and I'll be with him. I know you will. On the 8:15 to Croydon. Ooh.
Find out why so many people are getting back on board. Southern, following your train of thought.
One Catholic order is at the very heart of the Da Vinci Code's conspiracy.
Now, 17 million people have heard of Opus Dei.
But how true is the novel's portrayal? Do members self-flagellate in the name of God? And is there really an albino monk named Silas?
There are no monks in Opus Dei. Am I albino? I am not.
Opus Dei and the Da Vinci Code, Monday at 8 on 4.
Welcome back. 3.5 million people are homeless, and 2 months after Pakistan's earthquake, thousands of survivors are still without the most basic shelter. Now, a specialist team of mountaineers is being deployed by the UN to seek out the most remote villages, and they're still discovering areas where rescuers haven't managed to reach. Our correspondent, Ian Williams, joined the quake jumpers as the helicopter crossed the damaged zone to the high-altitude villages of Pakka Bihak and Kundal in the mountainous northwest frontier province.
Animals scatter in panic as our helicopter approaches a remote village which had been without aid for 2 months. Kundal clings precariously to the mountainside, one of several communities cut off as a result of the earthquake, their plight unknown to the outside world. The helicopter lands cautiously on a terrace below the village. Local leaders try and calm the villagers, telling them to be patient and to keep clear of the swirling blades of the chopper. They are in desperate need of help.
Government relief not reach in this area.
No government relief
no
here?
No come. The people do not have tent and tarts, anything.
From the helicopter, a team of mountaineers led by Nisar Malik. He orders them to fan out and assess the needs of the village. They first discovered Kundal a day earlier and are now bringing in emergency provisions. Usually the village would stock up with food and medicine well ahead of the winter. This year that's not been possible.
Doing is we arrive here, do the assessment, give them relief the same day. And that's the only way forward, because by the time it gets into the system, it will function, but it may be too late. I mean, even if someone wants to come here now, it's going to be more and more difficult. And we have a weather front coming in today and probably another one in 4 or 5 days. And people might not be able to reach this place in time. So the little window that we have, if we can put 6 to 10 tons down, at least we've taken care of these guys for a couple of weeks.
Even at the best of times, this place is pretty inaccessible. Donkey tracks providing the only routes in and out have been blocked by landslides. And only 2 days ago, a villager died as a result of another rockfall as he was heading down the valley in search of supplies. Nisar's team are known as the quake jumpers, employed by the World Food Programme to scour vast mountainous areas in search of communities not yet touched by the relief effort. If they see tents, they assume some aid has arrived. Elsewhere they look for people, since some villages are purely seasonal.
I think there are fewer and fewer places now, but you know, even if there's one we've missed, that's too many. And I'm just concerned that, you know, this is the time we've got to find them and start a system to service them. We're trailblazing because there's no other way to find them. You have to physically go to places.
With their aging Russian helicopter and Ukrainian pilots, the idea is to sidestep the aid bureaucracy, to open places up, the more formal relief effort following in their wake. That's what's happened in Pakka Bihak, a largely flattened hillside village discovered by the quake jumpers 2 weeks ago. though the formal relief that's followed has been patchy. Tents brought in by the army proving to be useless when the first snow arrived.
The poles broke and the tents collapsed. There were children inside at the time. We had done our best to keep the tents clear of snow. After the poles broke, we told the army, and they told us to replace the poles with wood. But that didn't work either. So now they are bringing in corrugated iron sheets.
Luckily, nobody was injured when the tents collapsed. The army is now bringing in more substantial supplies by helicopter, having established a small base here. So the army has at last reached this village, bringing in materials for shelters. But the locals grumble it's taken them far too long to get here. The race is now on to bring in enough for the winter. During our visit, a village council, a jirga, was meeting, hearing complaints that the relief effort is neither sufficient nor fair.
We're sitting here to consult each other. They are extremely concerned because they are not receiving enough to eat. Some people are getting bags of flour, some people are not. That's why we are gathered here.
But at least Packer Bihak now has a flow of aid. In Kundal, conditions are much harsher. And Nisar's mountaineers return to report that 4 villages, each of around 300 people, are in need. These are fiercely independent tribal people, and village rivalries often run deep. But a committee has been set up to distribute the aid. The mountaineers evacuate a group of villagers for medical. A little boy injured from a fall, and an elderly couple. The village doesn't have the medicine to treat them. Their first trip in a helicopter is a short ride to the plains below, but it must seem like an eternity. One more village then, the aid effort, an effort that will become far more difficult as the winter closes in. Ian Williams, Channel 4 News, Northwest Frontier Province.
Ian Williams out there with quake jumpers.